Hi, I'm Dan Flowen. Thanks for having me this morning. So if you didn't know me, you probably wouldn't take long to figure out that I'm a fisherman. I usually look the part. I've got shorts, a shirt, fishing shirt, a fishing hat, and a nice pair of Costa sunglasses. Laurel, our daughter, calls it my uniform. And so I look the part most days. So you probably wouldn't be surprised to find out that our story starts on a fishing boat. As you saw in the video, it was the summer of 2001, and my two work buddies are out on a boat, and we're fishing because we just got laid off last week. On our way back home, after a long day of successful fishing, we decided we're going to launch a business together. And I can't wait to get home and tell Julie all about it. Julie, after intense analysis and drawing upon her 45 years of experience in this business, I present to you our new company name, Professional Materials Services. And our acronym is going to be PMS. At night, Julie, with her help, she helps us rename the company to Professional Materials Management, or PM2 for short. Now, experts say that you should expect to lose money for the first 3 years after launching a new business, but we didn't buy that old wives' tale. 3 years later, we burned through every dime we had, and we were in debt to the hilt. Totally lost and frustrated and not knowing what to do next, I go out to the dock and I start casting a plug along the seawall just to have some time to think. And in that quiet moment, I hear a voice say to me, "The business is mine, Dan. It always has been. Turn it back over to me, and I will take care of you. Trust in me." Man, what the heck was that? If that was God, we've just entered some uncharted waters here. After a while, I conclude, even if that wasn't God, He can't possibly do worse with the business than we have. So we decide to give the business to God. And we tell our people that they now work for a company that's owned by God. We change our mission statement accordingly. And I want you to see what God did next. The left side of that red line there is when we thought we owned PM2. The right side of that line is when God owned PM2. Later that year, I started attending the Friday morning men's group here at Heritage. At that time, I had no idea what this group would come to mean to me. These are my brothers. One Friday morning, my friend Jim comes up to me and he's talking to me about this Christian CEO roundtable called C12. And he talks about the strong bonds he formed there and how C12 helped him with his family, his marriage, his business, just tremendous impact by C12. So on Jim's recommendation, I joined C12 that month. Now, C12 meets for an entire day once a month, and we talk about things like how to run God's company like a ministry and working on the business as opposed to in it. But from the very start, our group chair, Scott Hitchcock, was urging me to start journaling. I thought, journaling? That sounds a lot like a diary to me. I'm a man's man. I don't do keepsake boxes, I don't do lockets, and I sure don't write in a diary. But Scott assured me that writing in a journal is not a diary. So after much prodding, I decided to start writing. I figured it wouldn't take much. Usually I'm a man of pretty few words. I'm an introvert by nature. So I figured I'd run out of things to write about pretty quick. As it turns out, I had a few things to say. I think of this thing as my miracle tracker. Anytime I want to be reminded of what God did for me, how he protected me, and how he provided for me, I just go back to my journal. I highly recommend it. By the summer of 2007, PM2 is risen from the ashes, and we're riding high, and things are going great. I mean, we have a beautiful home on a saltwater canal with a fishing boat hanging in the backyard. Our daughter Laurel calls this place the party house. She loves being that girl at school who spends her weekends on the boat. Let me tell you, for this fisherman, life is good. I came across a quote by Alan Redpath that goes like this: when God wants to do an impossible task, he takes an impossible man and he crushes him. In September 2007, I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic melanoma and given 8 months to live. Some of you might remember the day I spoke at church that day.
For those of you who may not recognize me, I brought a picture along that might help you along a little bit. Let's put it up on screen. You see, I've got stage 4 metastatic melanoma, and I'm undergoing chemo treatments right now, so that explains my new hairdo. You know, a very good old friend of mine, Bill Huff, told me, Dan, at least your hair is going to come back. I'm afraid Bill's is long gone. But on a serious note, metastatic melanoma is a very serious, dangerous kind of cancer, and going straightly by the numbers, the average life expectancy is about 8 months. You know, it's never a good thing when your oncologist takes you by the hand and looks you in the eye and says, Dan, I'm worried about you.
At that time, I had tumors on both adrenal glands, my liver, my lungs, several soft tissue areas around my body, and in my bones. So today, I'd like to share with you the rest of the story. About a week after I spoke here at Heritage back in 2007, I went to our monthly C12 meeting. By then, the news had traveled to my group, and by the time we got to our prayer time in the agenda, men started just spontaneously rising from their chairs and coming over to place their hands on my shoulders and my arms. And they start to pray for me, thanking God for healing me as though it had already happened. Mark 11:24 says, therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. I'd seen this verse before, but I've never seen anybody actually do it. Then after the prayer concludes, one of the men, Chris, turns to face me, and he puts both hands on my shoulders and looks me square in the eye and says, you are already healed. You are already healed. Dan, you are already healed. And at that moment, I dared to consider that maybe, just maybe, God had delivered the antidote to cure me that day. And that maybe it would just take some time for the healing to manifest itself in my body. A few days later, the phone rings, and it's my dad. He wants to share with me what he heard God telling him this morning. He says, I believe God is saying, I trust you to stand tall here, Dan. I'm going to be with you. You can do this. I want you to focus completely on me, and I'll take care of the rest. God is going to use this for his glory. There's going to be a miracle. We don't know what the miracle is yet, but we walk in faith, knowing God is in charge. Son, you've been drafted to be in this army, and you're on the point, and God is right there with you. We don't know how the battle ends, but you're going to be okay. Don't despair. Hold on to your faith. Whatever happens, it's all good. As I sit there with the phone in my ear, I'm thinking about what Dad just said, and I began to embrace Dad's godly perspective, and suddenly this great sense of honor comes over me that I've just been given this amazing special assignment, and I never want to let God down. Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm petrified, but it feels like an honor. Dad's perspective is a game changer for me. At night, I sit down and write in my journal about being on point. On point, all your senses go on high alert. You hear the faintest whisper. You spot the slightest movement ahead. You smell everything and you detect the enemy's foul stench from miles away. On point, talking too much can be fatal, so you watch and you listen. On point, you constantly pray as you're walking. And when you're under attack with bullets whistling by your head and mortars exploding all around, you block out all else and you focus on your platoon leader. Your platoon leader often gives you signals to communicate with you, so you dare not take your eye off him for too long. He gives an order and you obey it immediately and without question, because you know that he is the only one who's going to get you through this. On point is where you learn about faith and the power of obedience. Let me share with you a love lesson that one of my friends taught me. It's 7 a.m. on Friday morning, and our Friday morning men's group is just breaking up for the morning, and Jim walks over to me looking like he's got something important to tell me. He says, "Hey, Dan, I just want you to know something." "Really, Jim? What's that?" Well, Jim bends down and he takes off his shoe, and he comes back up with his shoe, and he shakes it. And it sounds like there's something in there, like a hunk of metal or a rock or something. He just standing there shaking his shoe, smiling at me. And I thought, what on earth? And I'm really confused. So he tips over his shoe, and a smooth pebble rolls out into his palm. And as the pebble, this pebble is a little smaller than a pea. And as the pebble he is in his hand there, the very thoughtful, deep look comes over his face, and he says, "Dan, I put this pebble in my shoe to remind me to pray for you. Whenever I feel the pebble, I pray for you. I just wanted you to know." I was speechless. You see, love is willing to be uncomfortable for another. Now, soon after this, Moffitt Cancer Center installed a rod down my femur. And there it is. There was a lesion in my femur that had weakened the bone, so they needed to put that in there to reinforce it. But once I'd healed from the rod being installed, then we start what Moffitt calls the big guns. This is a cocktail of the strongest chemo drugs Moffitt has to offer. This is the daisy cutter of all chemo. And the name of the game, evidently, is to kill everything in sight. I just pray that I'm among the living when the smoke clears. The year 2008 is a blur for me. I spend most of my time on my back. Now, one thing you need to know about PM2 is that back then I was the primary seller of our services, so being on my back for a year meant that our project pipeline dried up to nothing. And PM2 starts hemorrhaging in a big way. I remember one morning when I was particularly freaked out about our financial situation, and I'm talking to Julie about it. She's been telling me for a while now that we need to sell the house and sell the boat, and I'm not having it. We built our life and family identity around being on the water, I tell her. How can we throw that all away? I mean, we could maybe sell the house, but how can we seriously consider selling the boat? I mean, that boat defines who we are. Julia doesn't skip a beat. She says, that's exactly the problem. That boat defines who we are. Light bulb. It's now New Year's Day, 2009, and I'm driving home from the hospital where I go to get a daily chemo shot. Nearing home, I drive down Independence Parkway in the left-hand turn lane, and I roll up to the intersection at the stoplight. As I sit there, I see a glance to my left, and I see a haggard, middle-aged man right outside my window standing on the curb. His skin is tanned and like leather. His eyes are bloodshot and sunken in. His hair is just brittle and dry like dead grass, and his face is all pitted and full of sores. And he's holding a sign that says, "Homeless, God bless." I'm just tired from all the constant chemo I've got going through my veins, and I just want to go home, you know. And I start thinking about all the reasons why I don't need to help this guy. I figure he must be a meth addict. He looks doped up to the hilt. So I decide to look away and not make any further eye contact. Besides, usually I don't carry much cash in my wallet, and today's no different. I'm bone dry today, so I figure, well, tough luck, fella, maybe next time. The light turns green, and I turn left to head down the boulevard toward our neighborhood, just a few blocks down the road. And as I go, I hear this voice that's emanating from the depths of my soul. It says, "Are you seriously going to leave my child back there and not help him?" Oh, man, I know who that is. I'm tired and I want to go home, so I try to ignore it, and I just keep on driving. A few seconds later, a little louder this time, he says, "Dan, are you seriously going to leave my child standing back there and not help him after all I'm doing for you, after how I'm healing you?" Oh, God, please just let me go home. I'm tired. I got nothing in my wallet. Can I please just go home? And I keep on driving. A few seconds later, I arrive at the entrance of our neighborhood. God has blessed us to live in a very nice gated community, so I hit the remote to open the gate. And as my car rolls through the gate, I hear in a very loud and clear voice, "Really, Dan?" Suddenly, some words from the Bible hit me like a ton of bricks. "Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Completely convicted, I turn my car around the backside of the guard shack, go back outside the neighborhood across the street to a drive-up ATM. I get $40, 20 for me and 20 for the homeless guy, I figure. Normally I'd give about $1 or maybe some loose change, but I don't know, today I'm feeling like a big spender. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the conversation I've just been a part of. I wheel out of the ATM and head down the road to where the guy was standing. And as I go, God says one more thing. He says, "Don't just throw a 20 out the window as you drive by. Get out of your car and talk with him. Got something I want to say to him through you today." Oh, man, I've never done that before. Come on. Fine. I'll do it. But what do you want me to say to him? Tell him that I love him. As I roll up to the intersection, I see that there are now 2 panhandlers, one on each opposing corner. Naturally. I guess I deserve that. Then in a moment of clarity, I realize what a selfish idiot I'm being, and I apologize. God, I'm sorry for being so difficult. You can count on me to deliver your message. And so I park, get out of my car, and start walking toward those 2 men. By the end of 2009, Julie and I have not taken a salary from PM2 in over a year. We sold the boat the previous April, hoping to slow a little bit of bleeding, but that proved to me not nearly enough. We listed the house several months ago, and no offers are coming. Our financial options are getting fewer and fewer. By the spring of 2010, we're out of options. We have foreclosed on our house, and we declare personal bankruptcy. This, for me, was harder than dying of cancer. I mean, after all, if I died of cancer, Laurel and Julie would be set for life with my proceeds from the life insurance policy. But dying of cancer didn't seem to be in God's plan. So I guess we were going to do this the hard way. In the weeks that follow, God brings us some specific tools and instructions, some non-traditional medical options that you can read about in the book here, that begin to have a tremendous positive effect on my healing. Miraculous healing is going on. By now, we're living in a rental house in Lutz, not on the water, mind you. And the prospect of ever owning another home seems light years away. But overall, things are really looking pretty good. I mean, we are debt-free, and God is healing me in miraculous ways. There's an old saying that fishermen know. Never leave fish to find fish. I mean, if you're in a place where God is blessing you richly, why would you ever pull up stakes and leave and go and look for something better somewhere else? That seems ridiculous, doesn't it? And yet, that's exactly what I did. I began to stray from the instructions that God had given me. I was not nearly as disciplined as I had been, and I was resting on my laurels. Knowing this, going into our next appointment at Moffitt to get the latest scan results, I'm bracing for bad news. And God does not disappoint. As we sit there in the exam room, the doctor is telling us how now tumors are growing and multiplying significantly. Just then I hear that now familiar voice, and it drowns out whatever else the doc is talking about. He says, Dan, I want you to take out the rod in your left femur, and I want you to get back to the things I brought you before. And I start yelling at God in my mind. You want me to what? I mean, okay, I'll get back to the things you brought me before, but don't you think it's a little ridiculous to take out the rod? Is that seriously necessary? If I ask this guy to take out the rod, he's going to think I'm a nut job. Now, the fact is that my bone had regenerated by then, which was highly unusual in itself. So there was no structural reason for that rod to be in there anymore. Now, from a purely medical perspective, it wasn't hurting me either, so there's absolutely no reason to take it out, except that God wants it out. Amazingly, the surgeon agrees to take it out. No argument whatsoever. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that God wants it out. Isn't it amazing how God removes barriers to things He wants done? Here it is, guys. Pure titanium. A few weeks later, we get a new scan results that now show all tumors are either dead or shrinking significantly. Note to self. The next time God tells you to do something, do it immediately and without hesitation, and He will bless you and protect you as you do that. For years after the rod is removed, tumors continue to shrink. The only problem is PM2 revenues are also shrinking lately, and I am dumbfounded. I mean, we've got all these opportunities in the water. We've got proposals out there, lots of them, and none of them are closing. We should be doing great, but instead we're bleeding profusely. And I start yelling at God again. What the heck are you doing, Lord? Why are you withholding the blessing from your company? Do you not care that we're going to be laying off people very soon? What are you doing? What have I left undone? What or who is the problem here, God? Then a thought occurs to me in the Bible. I think of the story of how Joshua's soldiers, Achan, had broken God's covenant, and God was not going to bless the Israelites until Joshua removed the evil from his camp. Then it hits me who the evil in our camp is. It's me. You see, for many years I've been fooling myself that my lustful thoughts were not damaging to me, that God was not watching, but He has been watching. He does care, and He intends to rid me of them. The following week, back at C12, I'm sharing our financial troubles with our group and telling them how God showed me who the evil in PM2's camp is. And as I finish my sad tale of woe, Dave, one of the guys in the group, he's got these words for me. He says, "Behind this is the blessing. Remove this evil from your camp, and then and only then will God release His blessing on you and PM2. Behind this is the blessing. Stay the course, Danny. Remove the evil in the camp and do whatever the Father says." Now, guys, I think there's one thing that we all know is true about how us men are wired. Mike from our Friday morning men's group puts it this way. Men stop thinking about sex about halfway through the embalming process. So believe me when I say removing the evil in my camp was not a cakewalk. And I still wrestle with it from time to time. But God honored my commitment to think about more worthy things. Philippians 4:8 says, "Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise." Once the evil in my camp is removed, God releases the blessing, and the log jam breaks. Since then, I've been declared 100% cured from stage 4 metastatic melanoma. That's it. Our family and our marriage are happy and healthy. PM2 has never done better. And God has blessed us to be able to buy a home again, back out on the water. But this time, we have vowed never to let it define us. Instead, we feel led to use this home and our boat as a refuge for God's children. Now, one thing I want to mention here I want to make sure I'm very clear on, that, some amazing things happened in our lives, and you might make the connection that, well, just ask in prayer and be obedient and you'll get everything you ask for. But God is not a gumball machine. The only point here, and in the book, I hope you'll get this from the book, that the point is to grow your faith, stay faithful, and be obedient, and then leave the rest to God. That's the point. Oh, believe me, I by no means think I'm fully baked. It's a daily challenge trying to be the man that God has called me to be. But as I look back on where God has brought us, I see that this story was never about cancer. Cancer was just one tool that he used to change me from the inside out. I wear this necklace most days. I can get it out. To remind me of where God has brought me and what he expects of me. For me, this necklace has a double meaning. The first one is obvious enough, I suppose. After all, I'm a fisherman. But the second is the more important. Thanks to God's leading, I now see myself as a fisher of men in training. A fisherman's apprentice, as it were. And every time I feel this rough cord on my neck, I'm reminded to always have a line in the water for one of God's children. So guys, I've just given you the highlights, some of the high spots this morning. If you'd like to know more, I invite you to pick up a book out in the back, out there at the table. If you feel led to put anything in the basket out there, just know that all of your gifts go straight back to the ministries at Heritage. This is like talking in front of my family. A lot of you guys prayed me right here, didn't you? Thanks for letting me share this story with you today, and I pray for God's blessing on you as you strive to be more of a fisher of men. Amen.